hello, everyone. I'm Reverend Karla. Welcome to Spirituality Matters. And now I invite you to settle in and find that sacred space between here where I am and there where you are. And let us be reminded that the Holy transcends our physical bodies, and our time together is just as sacred and meaningful as if we were sitting beside one another. Okay, so let's get started. My friends, I am so excited about today's interview. You are going to meet one of the most unique and endearing and spiritual people on TikTok. Yes, I said it. This, my friends, is Jegaysus. And I cannot wait for you to learn more about this amazing human. Jegaysus, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
So we're going to get right to it. Now, I came across you. I joined TikTok a little over a year ago, and I think you were one of the first humans that I started to follow, and we became mutuals, which is always such an honor for me when that happens. So thank you for allowing this boomer to come into your circle of friends. It always,
Oh no,
I've always felt like a little
I don't
outsider.
see age.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. So, Jegaysus, I would just love to start with you opening the platform for you to tell your story, but I would love for the audience to hear about your name, Jegaysus, and why you chose that for your platform.
Well, for the name specifically, I wish I had like some great origin story, but I had the idea of doing, a gay representation of Jesus. People kept on coming to me and telling me, you look just like Jesus, but you're gay, so you can't be. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. If I look like the white depiction of Da Vinci's Jesus, me being gay actually like fits into that mold even better. So I was like, I should do this as like a costume. I should do this as a Halloween thing, just like a one-time spam account. I already had another TikTok profile with politics and a whole dive in that situation. So I was like, let's get together a costume. It can't be that hard, right? I have the hair, I have the face, I have the beard. And I did that on Halloween last year. And it kind of just like blew up from there. And then it was supposed to just be kind of like a fun thing, but the actual name, I was just gonna be Gay Jesus, and surprisingly enough, that's either taken or blocked by TikTok. So I couldn't use that handle, and I was like, how do I convey like I don't even remember the other ones I tried, like homosexual Jesus, obviously, but nothing was catchy, nothing was open. So I just stuck the gay in the middle of the Jesus.
It works. It's great. Well, and one thing I notice about your videos, besides being also entertaining, because your editing is really, really good.
Thank you.
You're like a theologian. Your biblical knowledge is really on point. Now, this is coming from a person who's done the homework. I've studied the Bible since I was 6 years old. And I did the whole collegiate studies before I went to seminary. And I find myself just being like, that's spot on. What you just said, you just did one about Lucifer, and also even pushing people out into their comfort zones to say there are alternative narratives to these stories, like the one you gave about Ruth and Boaz and Naomi. Thank you very much. We'll tell you later how to find Jegaysus on TikTok, and also we'll put it in the show notes. But can you tell me a little bit about your experience around your biblical knowledge? Because like I said, I am impressed.
I always find it so strange when people are impressed by, I guess, my knowledge, because for me, it's very like layman's attempt at theology. I don't have any formal background or study around any of these topics. I was raised in the church, but of course they didn't get into nearly the kind of content that I do. It was much more, charismatic churches, and I guess the non-denominational church was kind of also charismatic, but that's a different story. So that was all just like, just the regular Bible stories. Anything I've found outside of that has just been from curiosity throughout when I was in church, and research that I did on my own time. Just reading around the stories, because they focus on certain parts. So you have to really go in and read the Bible yourself if you want to get the rest of the story.
Absolutely.
And then when I started my account, questions coming from comments, but what about this? How does this relate to this? And then me being like, I don't know. and then just having to go and read, something from Augustine and figure out why Augustine was saying what and why that influenced the Catholic Church at the time to do this decree or this, dogma was in place. And it's really like a collaborative effort between me and the viewers to like keep the page going and finding a new path every other day.
Wow, that's fascinating. So tell me, you mentioned that you do have a religious experience and some church background.
Mhm.
If that's something that you're willing to share, I know our followers would love to hear that. There's so many people who are healing from religious trauma and
Sure.
deconstructing from their religious beliefs. So let just share your whatever part of your history that you would love to share with us.
Yeah. So as a younger kid, I was raised in the Baptist church. So that was fun,
Mhm.
if that's the word we can
Yeah,
use.
another thing we have in common here.
So you understand.
Yes.
I wasn't there very long. I think we probably left when I was like 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, somewhere in there. Before I was a full-fledged teenager, there was a scandal in the church, and then the church was ripped apart and split into two. Um, and it wasn't over like doctrine, it was over, personal choices. And I think that was
Mm.
probably the first time I realized that, firstly, pastors are not infallible and they are very much humans. But there was a cheating scandal where the
Oh,
pastor was having an affair and he wanted to keep teaching, but a lot of the congregation felt like he was no longer in a place to speak on the word. So just watching that division at such a young age made me, I don't want to say confused, but made me very skeptical of who I trust fully. Because I saw this guy, with all the spit and venom yelling about how everyone else is doing wrong every single weekend. And little did I know that he was doing things too. Uh,
that
so
happens more often than
it
we
does.
know. Yeah.
It does. And that's why I tell people all the time, like, to make sure that you're getting multiple views on sources too. It's very important not to put all your eggs in one person, and to formulate your own kind of connections and opinions on
Hmm.
things. Because you don't necessarily know if these people have the best intentions. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And it's hard to tell sometimes. So that was an early lesson for me. From there, we went into non-denominational church. I learned, less about, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? There's structure in the Baptist church. There was their
Yeah.
own ideas
The
of how things should process.
the dogma,
The
the dogma and the
dogma.
ritual. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a way to learn the Bible without as much as the dogma and just like the performance of the ceremony, I guess.
Hmm.
So that was an interesting flip. And from there, I just really delved into being like a Jesus warrior, being like the best evangelist I could be, going on every mission trip that was out there, opportunity wise, making sure that I was trying to convert all my friends at school, getting into debates with my best friend. We actually ended up leaving each other because of that. She was Mormon and I was non-denominational, and it was just like, um, yeah. So I was that kid, man. I was on fire, and I was making sure that everyone was going to hear about it. And that all took a back seat. I left the church, and I really haven't done all the research and Bible stuff until this account, really. So that's been probably like 10 years for me coming back into it.
So you're gay. You're
Mhm.
openly gay, proud and loud, and it's not only part of your dare I call it a ministry on TikTok, because it is helping people. Anything that you do
Sure.
when you start giving people an alternative view, this is exactly what people need to hear. But at what point in was that ever were you ever at conflict with your sexual authenticity
Yeah.
and your religion? Was there ever a crisis of faith for you with that?
Yeah. I think the interesting thing for me is I was always extremely pressured from the outside. There was definitely a lot of pressure from the church, from pastors, from ministers. When I was younger, obviously, I wasn't out. I was hiding it. I came out or was forced out when I was probably 12 or 13. So I was
Mm.
pretty young. And that was still right in the middle of my Jesus Warrior campaign. What had happened, though, is my parents went to the pastor and was like, here he is. He's struggling with homosexuality, blah, blah, blah. So then I used to have meetings with my youth pastor one-on-one. And at that time, we were actually getting ready to go on a mission trip to India. And we were going to go over there, spread the word. But I was removed after doing all the work to like raise the funds and be able to get myself a ticket there. They were like, we don't think you should go, because how are you going to spread the word to other people when you're not following it yourself? And I think that was the biggest cut to me during that time. Because for me, especially as a 13-year-old, it's not like I was participating in any sexual activity. It was just something that I was coming to as an identity. So for them to say just the identity itself was sinful enough that I can't spread the word, which at the time I was still so in love with and wanted that to be spreading everywhere, that was a big hit. Because I was like, so it's not something that's wrong with what I'm doing. It's not my actions. It's not even that I don't know my material enough to speak on it. It's specifically just an identity issue. That was the biggest cut. From there, I was also in like ex-gay therapy through a Christian ministry. They were tied to Exodus, which is one of the biggest ex-gay platforms there is. And that was a lot, sitting in therapy with no real route to change. I didn't struggle with it myself personally as much as I did externally. Like in my heart, I knew there was nothing that was going to change. I wasn't the type to sit there and pray at night, like, please make me straight. It was much more like, please get these people off my back.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah. But it was like a good year, and then it all fell apart and we stopped going to therapy. It obviously wasn't going to be a thing. And my parents came to accept it. We all just kind of did our separate evaluations of what that meant. And they just wanted to say, like, give it a try, but we rolled it back. It didn't work. And now you're fine.
So
the short summary.
So then your parents and your inner circle of family are now supportive and loving. Have they also deconstructed from that religious heritage, or?
Yeah. My mom, very much so. I don't know how much I could speak to her own journey, but she's much more, how would I say it, like spiritualistic now, so much more into like being in touch with like, and the universe guides her. And I almost describe it almost as like, I don't know, when you kind of deconstruct from religion, for some people, it's like not being a Christian as much as it is like being invested in the Holy Spirit, right? So it's like separating that Christian dogma into just saying, I know what God's love feels like, and I'm going to follow that spirit to where it leads me, to help people, to understand people, to empathize with people. So it's much more leaning into the spirit side of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where she's at.
So that's beautiful. And thank you for opening up about your past. It's interesting to see who you are now and how comfortable you are. It's obvious to me that I'm not speaking for you in any way, but what I see is someone who is who's exemplifying what it means to heal from that type of traumatic experience. Because somebody who's trying to change the essence of you, I mean, who you truly are, can have long-lasting impact. But to hear you say that even at the age of 13, it was all externalized, that you were able to say, okay, these people just need to leave me alone. I know who I am. That's so powerful. And I don't want anyone listening to this to miss that profound point. That's amazing. And I want to go down a little rabbit hole with you, because can you share a little bit about your faith now? Because your content really focuses more on, okay, you've learned this, but consider this, that, which I love. I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, this is a good point. I need to do something like this. So can you share a little bit about what does that look like now for you? You mentioned God and you mentioned the Holy Spirit. So you came from a religion that was very much patriarchal, literal interpretation of the Bible. Where are you with it now?
Yeah. So usually I'll give you some. Usually I don't talk about it because it's like a war subject. I usually say on my page that I don't discuss any of my personal beliefs, because You know,
Yes.
if
Well, it's a
you
safe
say
space
you're a
here.
Methodist, then you're like making the Pentecostals mad, and if you say
Yes.
you're an atheist, you make all the Christians mad, and then
Right.
it keeps on going. Someone's always gonna be on the opposite side. So I always like to say I'm a projection, and I like to just put out what my content is, and then everyone can absorb it in their own way. You
That's
know, I have
nice.
people who are like, "Oh, you helped me reconstruct my faith," and like I finally feel good to be a Christian again. And I'm like, "That's great." And then I have people who are like, "Oh, I just left religion and now I'm an atheist because your content. Thank you so much." I'm like, "That's great."
I get the same
Whatever you
thing.
want. Yeah.
I love it when they say, you're the kind of Christian I want to be. And like, well, wait, have you seen my bio? But that's okay. Please
I love it.
continue.
So I mean, where I'm at much more so is like I'm like fully deconstructed. I see religion as like a box that holds us. I'm much more about like spiritual teachers, and in terms of like, you know, Jesus being a good person to exemplify. I'm much more removed from religion as a house. um I guess I'm like very in tune with like a spiritual oneness. Like that's what I regard it to. I don't regard there as being like a heaven or like a place where people sit in foreverness, but I do believe in like an energy source that
Mm.
is above everything else, where all life returns to, and just like one little spark into a bubble, a big bubble that's always moving. um and that's kind of where I'm at. So it's more like a bit of a Buddhist lean with
Mhm.
like a spiritual lean over here.
I absolutely get that. Do you see that? Because I think probably the hardest thing for me to also define, even though I think it's the one place that if we can start to create language around it, is this Holy Spirit mystical connection.
Mhm.
But I think for so many of us, well, like for instance, one of the words that for the longest time I wouldn't use is are words like holy and sacred, because those have
Yeah.
almost been so overused and tied to religion
Yeah.
that they really belong to spirituality. So I've started to reuse those words to say, no, no, this is really how the container that they
Sure.
belong in. Which is also part of my fight to reclaim some of the rainbow too. Like not just one religion owns that.
Yeah.
It reflects so much, especially for the LGBTQIA plus community. But so the Holy Spirit,
Mhm.
what obviously we know, especially from a Baptist perspective,
Yeah.
um, most Baptists would say that the gifts of the Holy Spirit died with the prophets,
Mhm.
or the apostles. So what do you feel now, like our connection? I
Sure.
feel something with you that's above a motherly affection. but
Right.
but so what does that feel like for you, and
Mhm.
does it have a name like the Holy Spirit? Is that something that feels quantifiable to you now?
Sure. So here, I love that you said that you are trying to separate like the Holy Spirit from its negative connotations, because I entirely agree with you. And I was going to say maybe I was using the wrong word when I was using spirit, because you see it weaponized so often. People do things in the conviction of the Holy Spirit all the time, and sometimes they're hurtful, you know, or you run around people making assertive claims that you don't have the Holy Spirit. That's why you're not reading the Bible, right? Because you have to read it through the Spirit, and you're doing it with your mind. How dare you? So it's become like
Good
a
point.
weapon. It's became a
Good
weapon
point.
instead of like an entity, like it was supposed to. It's
Mhm.
supposed to represent like this greater movement and life force of God, right? Like the extension of how God animates the universe, and not a judgy McWeapon. So I mean, I think that relates back to kind of what I was saying, like the sacred one, right? Like just like this one massive energy that kind of infects all things or has its tendrils throughout the universe. And that's how I guess I would recommend I'm not my recommend, but you know what I mean, reconcile my views with the spirit. I see it as like a just it's so Eastern. It's so Eastern of me. But like, you know, just a chi that connects all of us, I guess I would
I
say.
well, I love it. And I think your words, I'm observing you stumbling around the same words that I do. And it
Right.
just came up recently when someone was talking about, I have witnessed the gifts of the Holy Spirit in different, I've been through Pentecostal, the apostolic faith. And then I'm like, well, what is available to us now? Because it shows up in different ways. And I think even your spiritual gifts that you're using, your physical attributes to that look like the white depiction of Jesus, to the advantage to disrupt norms, to be a disruptor, which I think that's what we're supposed to be doing right now. So I want to just give you some freedom here to understand, like, we just are now starting to find the words outside of religion, because it has been controlled so much by religion that we're just now saying, okay, what is this going to look like? So for instance, like when I first came to TikTok, I had never heard the word deconstruction. I called it the untangling. And it's like, oh, okay, everybody's already here and they're calling it deconstruction. So everybody knows what that means. So I'll just start calling it deconstruction. So we're finding each other, and we're just now starting to find those words. But I want to encourage you, because of your gifts, of the way you talk to people, to use that. It came here for a reason. You're the one who brought this up in this conversation. And I think your followers, the ones on TikTok who I know we have mutual followers, would really appreciate your perspective on the Holy Spirit, that how it's showing up with
the
you.
Spirit.
Yes.
Well, here's the other thing is, like, I'm on the like cuckoo train too, right? I mean, I don't mean that to anybody listening in like a bad way. I'm just saying I am. Like I wanted to say, because like you mentioned in the Baptist church, like how the gifts of the Spirit died with the prophet, right? And that I remember being so tormented by that when I was a kid too, because I've always had like spiritual gifts of discernment, of seeing things, hearing things, and like speaking to either people of past or in really like stressful, traumatic times, like future events. So I've always felt like connected to another side of some sorts. And so for that's probably one of the only reasons that I'm not like just like a nihilist and think that like there's no greater meaning to anything, right? Is because like I've seen things that I can't uncontrol. It's nothing I would force onto other people. I'm not like, hey, I talked to ghost. But for me, I know that I'm able to tap into a different spiritual awareness. And so I feel like that would be an interesting story to share, but then also people will think I'm crazy.
Oh my gosh.
See, it's stigmas that still keep me in a box sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, knock them all down.
I'm actually starting to sweat, and if you talk about that quivering of the Spirit, it's actually happening. Just the other night, I spoke to a group who asked me about the gifts of the Spirit. And one of the things that I talked about was, again, the way it's been defined by religion, we have limited how many of us have spiritual gifts. And then we don't realize how much we still haven't deconstructed from the stigma that says those are bad, or someone's going to say they're crazy. And just recently, before I started doing TikTok, I was doing spiritual care with people. So if you and I were in a spiritual care situation, I would start to get questions for you that you don't give me the answer. You go back and because the goal was always for you to understand that the answer lies inside you. And it's just recently I've started sharing that was a gift that I got, because I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to be an Oral Roberts or a Jimmy Swaggart or Jim Baker, one of those. You can look those people up, but you can just see that the people who took that and used it to profit off their gifts, like they were the only ones who received them. But I am telling you that you do have a gift, and I think that probably something that's ready to be, that we're being invited. Like, okay, we've started to be part of this energy that's created, and now we're this next level is starting to open up, where we get to reclaim some of the gifts of the Spirit, that they don't just exist inside institutionalized religion. They're out here for everyone.
Right.
So people who are listening to this and not seeing me, I am smiling from ear to ear as Jegaysus shared what his gifts are. And I want to encourage you to listen to those words and think about where you might be inhibiting yourself because of the stigma or worried about being judged, when there's so many of us out here who are now looking to be seen and affirmed for the gifts that we do have.
And I think everyone, and they don't always have to be like, you know, I wouldn't say like extra dimensional, but they don't have to be like out of the norm gifts, but everyone has spiritual gifts. Like the fact that Christianity has robbed that from so many people by like stifling it or calling it demonic on some of the other ones. They do, there's a lot of general acceptance and fostering of certain things like empathy and love, you know, those can be spiritual gifts, but everyone has some more than others in certain areas. It's different gifts, and it's something that should be explored and it should be grown. And finding that can be really hard if you're still in the process of deconstructing, or if you've been told that you are infected with some kind of evil. That's terrifying. Of course it is. So I think that you're definitely right. We should foster that community more, and we should start growing each other so that we can become stronger as just individuals.
Did you ever expect that we would be talking about that in this conversation? I didn't.
No,
I didn't know that's where we
no.
would go, but that's certainly what arose. Now, your platform is still growing, and you have a very dedicated audience on TikTok, and you're also now on Instagram as well. So you're diversifying. Do you have a website?
I have a website, but I don't have anything on it except for it's just linked to my Teespring merch store.
Okay. So you have a merchandise store. Tell me, so you this started out as something that you thought, well, this is a cute gimmick that I'm going to play with for Halloween. Then all of a sudden you are touching people's lives on a spiritual level. Where do you see this? Where do you see yourself going with this? What do you think the end game is going to be? Because it's well beyond Halloween.
It's beyond Halloween now. We'll see if it lasts till next Halloween. What if it's just a 1-year thing?
I don't think so.
I don't know what the future holds. I'm just trying to take it one day at a time. But like, I have all of these ideas that pop up, and unfortunately, I feel like work and doing my regular citizen duties are keeping me from that. So in the future, I really want to quit my job. I have the savings. I'm not expecting to necessarily make money off TikTok at the moment. But while I go back to school, it would be really nice to have the time to just focus on schoolwork and be able to go full time in whatever this may be. I really want to start an in-depth YouTube channel where I go into topics more. Even though TikTok has 3-minute videos now, I don't really use them. But even then, 3 minutes isn't enough to talk about these theological concepts that are really big.
Yeah. Like for part 2. And you can always, only so many times you can do that.
And people get so mad about it in the comments. I mean, obviously I can't explain every angle, but if I'm like saying, you know, like here's one little tidbit about the Council of Jerusalem, people in the comments are going to be like, oh, well, you didn't talk about when Augustine influenced Constantine to add the Jerusalem Council, even though it had nothing to do with Jewish people. Because I'm like, how would I have mentioned that in 30 seconds? Where was that going to come? And then you didn't talk about no. So I think that would be the next step for both my research and my growth, would be forcing myself to make longer form content and going more in depth in my research, but then also to kind of have that same energy I bring to TikTok to be able to bring to accessible and kind of, I hate saying dumbed down, but you know, accessible, broken apart structure in YouTube. Because I struggle with YouTube videos when I watch them. Sometimes they're just dry and they're just research papers really, and they're not as conversational as I like to be. So I think that would be cool to kind of delve into that deeper and give that to the people.
Yeah, and there's no way you'll be boring. There's absolutely no way. All right, so here's my final question for you.
Sure.
Let's say that at the end of this, whatever this is, 5-10 years now. So I'm gonna put you way out there that this is gonna monetize and it's gonna be able to support you. What would you like people to have gotten from your content and from the work that you're doing here? What would be your end game?
It's a big question. I want to be part of a zeitgeist. I feel like that's been something that's been a calling for me for a really long time, and I never knew what that would look like. I originally I was writing a book when I was like 16, and it was going to be like a gay young adult fantasy book, partly inspired by Twilight. But the reason I wanted to do that book so bad is because it was a book about like magic and like these witches, and this was before gay marriage was legalized. And so a huge under theme to the book was one of the witches had like the superpower of like being able to change the world they're in by just like being present, like through being there, people fell like in love with others, right? And also being able to kind of like project that into the future and see what's going on in the future. So I wanted that book, I know this is a big ask, but I wanted that book to show that like love could spread between people in like a empathic way. And then that eventually in the book led up to gay marriage being legalized everywhere in America. And it happened 3 years later, and I was like, well, now my book is useless because it's already legal. But I had this like, I want to like, you know, change kids as they're growing up so then they can see how they can vote. And I wanted it to be popular enough with straight people that they would also vote on these measures when they became adults. I had like these crazy dreams as a 16-year-old, but I've always wanted to be part of the zeitgeist or part of the conversation in that sense. So I think that's what I want from this character as well. I have messages, of course, of people who don't feel like they want to hurt themselves. And that's amazing on each individual personal level. That's amazing. But what I hope comes from that is, I mean, I'm amazed that I was able to do that for them in the first place, but now they get to go on and feel stronger in their next conversation, whatever that is. And maybe if I give them some ammo or even just like the confidence to be themselves, then they can go out and change the next conversation, which will then have a ripple effect to others. That's what I'm hoping. And I don't know if I'll ever even see what my account does, but I hope that just like knowing that in the back of my head that I am having an effect on those people out there in the world, that maybe it'll help things get better in the future.
That's beautiful. I'm going to help you pray that forward, my friend.
Thank you.
Now, let's wrap this up by you letting people know how they can find you out in the social media world.
Yeah, so the username is Jegaysus or Jegaysus. Guess spelled like it sounds, Jegaysus. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram with both those as username, as well as YouTube. I don't have a lot of content there, but I do have a hair routine, which people needed that one.
They do. Your hair is gorgeous.
Yes. So we will hopefully expand into YouTube more. But if you want to like talk to me directly, the only ones I check daily are Instagram and TikTok.
Well, yeah. Jegaysus, this has been a joy, an absolute joy. And I hope that you'll come back again some other time and spend time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your light. I love being comfortable with you. You're just so inviting and welcoming.
Oh, thank you.
And you do amazing work too. Oh. You're out there actually changing lives every day. So mad props.
Thank you, dear one. I will also include in the show notes how you can see this amazing human in action on TikTok and Instagram. All right, I'm going to close it out for now. Okay, beloveds, I am honored to be in this space with you, and I pray that you receive something. I know I did. The teacher teaches what she needs to hear, and today I learned so much from Jegaysus. And now, beloveds, go in peace and be at peace. Go in love, and may you be loved. Go and know that others are on this journey with you, and you are not alone. You are seen and deeply and unconditionally loved, just the way you are. Blessings on your week, and we will talk soon. Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to another uncut episode of Spirituality Matters. To submit questions to Rev Karla, email us at spiritualitymatters@revkarla.com. Follow @Rev Karla on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest for more spirituality teachings. Check out her blog posts at revkarla.com and sign up for email alerts while you're there so you don't miss a thing. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. Bye for now.